Like most gamers, I love a variety of game styles, but if I had to pick one genre that I find myself coming back to, it's without a doubt RPGs. And growing up in the 16-bit era of video game consoles like the SNES, that means pixel art JRPGs are always going to have a special place in my heart. Final Fantasy, Secret of Mana, Chrono Trigger, and Breath of Fire all immediately come to mind with legendary soundtracks, iconic characters, and great storytelling. So when I came across Beloved Rapture, a 2D pixel art game developed by Rapture Studios and published by Two Left Thumbs, aiming to recreate the charm of these classics, I was giddy to give it a try. While it doesn't have a significant number of reviews on Steam, it's currently sitting at 85% positive, so I blindly dove into it expecting it might have some issues, but overall would be a good game. Beloved Rapture is a story surrounding two main protagonists. You got Johann, a boy who grew up in a farm town raised by his mother and longing to see more of the world, and Aiden, a knight and naive son of a war hero general who is exiled to a faraway land and is looking to redeem himself. Through a traumatic twist of events, these two meet and journey together to save the Kingdom of Alexandria and stop the Aeons, an evil cult bent on releasing an ancient force to destroy the world. When launching the game, the first thing I noticed was a beautifully drawn animated intro screen with two troubled young adults sitting near a cliff, staring longingly at a sunset backed by a slow crescendo and a great music. And I immediately drew a parallel to A New Hope with Luke sitting on the desert rock, staring longingly at Tatooine's dual sunset, contemplating his future. I just had to know who these two guys were and what led them to that forlorn scene. In this game, you have two different difficulties. You have Classic Mode, which offers a more challenging combat experience, or you have Story Mode, which lowers the difficulty a bit and offers a more easygoing playthrough for those out to just experience the story and explore the world. Being a JRPG veteran, I opted for Classic Mode. I plugged in my PS5 controller and then started the adventure. For a pixel art game, this game looks beautiful. Tile sets are very well done, and there's enough variety to make different screens look unique, and even several biomes to make the world appear expansive and alive. Every character has unique, distinct looks that fit their personalities, and some even have alternate appearances with different clothing for story reasons. Some drawn backgrounds simply look incredible for their art style, and the animations both in and out of combat are so clean. Character emotes are expressed as a combination of the character sprites themselves having facial expressions, sometimes they have emotive little thought bubbles appearing over their head, and they always have full-drawn portraits next to their dialogue window when speaking. As far as enemies go, some are palette swaps, but that seems to be tied to their elemental strength, and overall, there's plenty enough variety in the different types of enemies I faced. They never felt repetitive. I'm looking at you there, Breath of the Wild. The music in Beloved Rapture is a journey unto its own. While I personally didn't find any tunes that are going to stick with me, they were always immersive and perfectly fit the mood of whatever I was doing. Watching through the recording content and editing this, I caught myself occasionally humming along with it. Because I didn't explicitly have permission to use the game's music in this video, it's not going to be featured here, but I've included a link to the developer's official YouTube channel where you can listen to several OST tracks. Additionally, you can purchase the OST separately if that's your thing. Sound effects were also plentiful and great, smoothly tying into their character animations to make events like characters drawing their blades in preparation for combat give that extra dopamine rush. I'm now going to touch a bit on exploration. If you're like me and you enjoy a game that lets you wander around and explore and rewards you for it, you're probably going to really enjoy this. Loot is absolutely everywhere, from mushrooms and flowers you can pick up which act as restorative items, to chests containing all sorts of items useful both in and out of combat. You can even find special monsters or shrines that give you items that you can use to upgrade your abilities. In Beloved Rapture, exploration is a feature. And the best part about it, there's no random encounters in this game. I find that so incredibly refreshing. There's some enemies walking around you can initiate combat with, or just ignore them if you don't want to. Now there is the occasional tile you walk on that will trigger a specific scripted battle, but outside of one specific area I'm going to talk about later, once an enemy is defeated, they don't come back, and you can just continue walking around indefinitely without being bothered. Now the obvious benefit is you aren't punished if you miss a chest by having to slog through a bunch of additional random battles while figuring out how to get to it. But a downside is the amount of XP and loot you get is a bit limited for the most part. I wouldn't worry too much about that though, because you are given so many consumable items just by exploring. You're never going to have to fall into that trope of saving the powerful consumables because you might need them later. I am that person, and believe me, I never felt starved for consumables, even though I exploited them a bit later, and we'll talk about that. Admittedly, sometimes walking around did feel a bit janky and awkward because there are these immovable rocks and flowers you can't pick up placed around in already tight spaces that just seem to further block the path as you're moving around. But that was only ever really a mild inconvenience to me, and I did enjoy the additional variety they gave to the world as you traveled through it. My biggest piece of advice though is to explore as much as you can as soon as you can before you advancing the story, because there are many places you just won't be able to go back to, even if it seems like you might be able to later. For a completionist and loot goblin like myself, it was a bit frustrating because I know there were things I missed thinking I could go back to some areas and I just wasn't able to. The level design is frequently puzzle based. Sometimes those puzzles involve pushing various switches or moving obstacles around, sliding across icy floors, or even dodging spinning blade traps. One dungeon in particular absolutely screams Zelda. It even included a timed gauntlet scaling across terrain and bypassing traps to get to a chest and pass through a gate before it closes. For the most part, all the puzzles were enjoyable, and there weren't any I found too difficult. I did experience an animation softlock once at the Wind Shrine puzzle, but it wasn't that big of a deal because the game allows you to save pretty much anywhere, and I did frequently take advantage of that feature. There's a bunch of mini games in Beloved Rapture as well. For the first long mile, it's just fishing, which it's neat, but it's also a little limited because like enemies, fish don't respawn once you catch them. Eventually though, you get to the town of Alexandria, which adds additional minigames. There's archery, which you have to score a certain number of points in an allotted time by aiming at these target dummies that drop down and pull up. There's a coliseum where you can fight tough battles for big rewards. And the first exploit I took advantage of, blackjack. Since you don't really have a way to grind for money and I want all the things, I noticed that since you can save anywhere, you can bet a large sum of money at blackjack, and if you lose, just quickly reload the save. If you win, save again with your winnings. I did shamelessly spend a bunch of time there doing that, and no, I don't regret it. I'm a gamer and I love the grind. Oh, and if you love side quests, you're not going to be disappointed here. Throughout the game, there are several NPCs you can talk to or job board postings you can read that offer side quests. Most of them are fairly simple, such as retrieving items or fighting a unique creature, but some reinforce the exploration feature, like this one quest where these triplets that want to play hide and seek, or this little kid looking for their lost dog. All these quests seem to offer good enough rewards that help you if you want to do them, but they're not required if you just want to speedrun past them. That leads me to the second exploit I took heavily advantage of, even though I didn't really need to. The only place I saw where enemies would respawn in this game is there's this nest of birds later in this game. They give good experience and they drop an item that sells for quite a bit of money. A few of these drops are required for one of the aforementioned side quests, but I spent a while here farming these things and I gained about 10 levels for each character, and I made enough money to buy 99 of every consumable I could. Again, completely unnecessary, but I want all the things. And that brings me to combat. I do have somewhat of a love-hate relationship with it. Combat in Beloved Rapture has this relic system that as your characters take actions, this gauge builds up, and when that gauge is full, it allows you to use these powerful abilities at the cost of some MP. Final Fantasy fans will immediately scream limit break. Every character has their own unique abilities with great animations, and as you upgrade your weapon throughout the game, it unlocks even more. Additionally, every character has a defend action. Taking the defend action will make your character strike a defensive pose and take less damage until their next turn, but it also heals them for a bit as long as you don't take the action more than once in a row. So if you just take another action first and then go back to defend again, you'll get more health. Spamming defend doesn't do a whole lot, but using it occasionally does help a ton. As for spells, you learn spells by fighting a stronger, unique boss-like creature, and can later learn upgraded versions of them by spending some money and items at a special merchant. Because your party composition changes throughout the game outside of your control, you can't control who learns what, but there is a good variety of elemental magic at your disposal. Most enemies have elements they're weak against and strong against. This is very much a rock, paper, scissors mechanic featured in many RPGs over the years like Pokemon or Chrono Trigger. There's a chart that gives you a good hint at what element a creature might be weak to based on what elements it uses, and after you defeat an enemy, they're added to a bestiary where you can just at any point in time look up all their stats and weaknesses. Sometimes combat in classic mode just felt a bit relentless. Everything hits hard, and I felt like I was always at the edge of my seat. I found myself using consumables all the time, which wasn't a problem on its own. There were plenty even before I exploited the game and acquired the world's supply of them. There was a point where after you recruit Krista, a magic-centric character who stays with your group for a majority of the game, I found I wasn't able to use her offensively nearly as much as I wanted to because she was pretty much forced into a healbot role to keep everyone alive. Now, it wasn't as bad once you consistently have a 4-person party, but that doesn't happen until later in the game. Also, I don't know why, but sometimes I encountered a bug where I'd input an action, I think specifically casting spells, but I'm not sure, and the action would get skipped and the ATB gauge would start filling up again, as if the character took the action when they actually never did anything. One of the other big issues I had with combat was action queuing in general felt kinda awful. Let me explain. When an enemy begins an action animation during battle, you're completely locked out of the combat interface until the animation is ended, even if you're in the middle of inputting an action yourself. This became very frustrating to me when I was facing 3 or 4 enemies at once, because their turns were always popping up in the middle of me picking my own actions. If any of this stuff sounds like it might bother you, it might be a better experience for you if you use story mode instead of classic mode. Every time you level up, you get 4 points you can distribute however you want amongst the different stats your character has. And there's also a bunch of different gear you get that will boost some stats and lower others. And then there's accessories that may give you bonuses as well, such as immune to poison. There might be optimal builds that change completely everything about combat, but I mostly spread my points around and boosting things equally, aside from making Johann more physically damage focused and Krista magically focused. Alright, let's talk about the story. Spoiler free. All the characters have their own motivations for being involved in the story and have unique personalities to match. You're not finding anything new or revolutionary, but they do all have their own backstories, they fit the narrative, and they grow as the story progresses. The story is a bit slow for the first half of the game. There's urgency and motivation, and the story does have some nice twists, but it was really the loot and exploration that drew me in for a while. About the halfway point, that changed, and I started to really want to know more about the characters, the politics of the world, and the enemies that seek to destroy it. The story elements do get quite dark at times, and while I don't think there are any common triggers in the game, it does narratively brush up against a couple. Overall though, the story was good. I'd say even above average for the genre, though the last chapter of the game felt really rushed. I really do wish they had spent some more time here and overall did some more QA testing. This is the golden age of indie games after all, and gamers are looking for a bit more polish than they used to. Admittedly, this isn't a game I see myself playing through again, and I'm not sure it does have much replayability outside of going back to pick up things you missed the first time around. There are various dialogue choices in the game, but they don't seem to really impact anything except for adding a couple different lines of additional dialogue, so I don't see that as a good reason to go through it again either. But despite everything, I did really enjoy my time in Beloved Rapture, and personally I thought the $20 I paid for it was well worth the 25 or so hours I put into it. If you're looking to scratch the itch for a new pixel art JRPG reminiscent of the classic greats, and you love exploration and loot, it's a no-brainer buy and play to me. Well, that's it for this one. If you played this game or you want to see another indie game get some spotlight, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.